Today is August 10th, 2021. The time is 5:33. Meeting was scheduled at 5:30 p.m. Sonia, would you please call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Coronado.
Here.
Mr. Hernandez.
Here.
Mrs. Mendoza.
Here.
Mr. Bayan.
Mr. Bayan has a conflict with another meeting.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Present.
Mrs. Searles.
Here.
And Mrs. Stroud.
Mrs. Trout also called in and said she would not be able to join us. She had a family issue.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, takes us to the next agenda item.
Item 1C, trustee ethical guidelines.
Geez.
Here we go. Tristan, 2.1, equity and attitude again.
Again,
I will be fair, just, and impartial in all my decisions and actions.
all three?
2.1, I will be fair, just.
That was a joke there.
Oh, I'm sorry. But I didn't get it. I will be fair, just, and impartial in all my decisions and actions. Who wants to lead it?
Anybody? It's pretty clear. It's not a very long one, huh? But it's pretty to the point. That's pretty much our mantra for being an elected official on the board. Not only do we have to, take everything into account and not take particular sides from certain issues, but be impartial in how we do that. We're almost like judges, I guess. And we sometimes rule as judges on certain items that come before us too.
So I guess, what happens when you're not fair, just, and impartial? When someone perceives that not to be the case? What
Well,
happens?
This happens. These papers. That's what happens. It's the punishment paper.
Oh, the.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anything, Mr. Tristan?
I guess it creates an aura of distrust between the community and us and how we're gonna guide the children, and how we're gonna help them.
So it goes back to this bond that potentially you're gonna may or may not vote today, making sure that it's fair, just, and impartial. It's a vow to the community. What we say we're gonna do, we're gonna do. It goes back to our the trust that you said. Anything else?
all right. Good.
I'll tell something.
Ms.
I
Rose.
think it means you need to read all that we're given, and God only knows we're given plenty. Look at tonight's book. Great example. And that in order to be fair, just, and impartial, that we should read the information given to us and communicate with anyone who needs to be communicated with, be it board president, superintendent, and in so doing, be able to make judgments, as Mr. Coronado said, that are fair, just, and impartial, based on the information that you have. So I think it's like everything in life. If you, communicate and educate yourself on an issue, then you should be able to act fair, just, and impartial. That should be the next step. And if you don't, well, then there should be some. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I think that covers this agenda item. Thank you, board. With the board's permission, we've been asked to take item 3B next, after we do the open forum. The board okay with picking up agenda item 3B after the forum? Okay, hearing no dissent, we will take up agenda item 3B after item 2. Sonia?
Yes, sir. We do have two speakers, board president. The first is Amber Gutierrez.
Okay. Ms. Gutierrez. And all the speakers are aware of our regulations regarding the open forum.
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Mr. Superintendent, Federal. My discussion for this evening is regarding the procedures and at times lenient procedures for COVID-19 risk reduction for students and staff from the first day of school to today. The district has implemented safety and preventative measures that are observed throughout the district. And these have been reviewed actually in the last meeting, August 5th. However, there are some that deserve to be immediately observed and changed to prevent high community transmission levels. Right now, the students are the ones that are more at risk. Elementary students do not have a vaccine for their age group. And so proactive and safe and preventative measures must be in place for these age groups. It is a public health issue of concern to the district, to the community, and to the state, of course, and it must be addressed to prevent the spread of this life-threatening virus. In my observation, classrooms have 4 desks right next to each other, and according to district policies and protocols, these must be at least 3 feet apart. The district safety protocols addresses guidelines for students and staff inside the buildings, however, not for outside of the buildings on campus premises. And I'll give you an example. In the morning and afternoon, students are at high risk of exposure and at high risk of transmission due to parent traffic on the sidewalks that have been designated for students as a walkway during drop-off and pickup times. Working parents gather on the sidewalks and also at exiting zones, and they closely interact with teachers and students. Not everyone wears a mask, nor parents, nor students, nor staff. In addition to classmates and staff, students are being exposed to other adults outside of the home 2 times a day, 5 times per week. I specifically suggest for the board to designate safe and clearly marked drop-off and pickup zones for the elementaries, and limiting working parents' proximity to other students. Drop-off and pickup walkways must only be used by students and staff as necessary. This is a preventive measure to eliminate any continuous risk. So although we must abide to state and TA mandates, these fail to recognize that COVID-19 and its variants are life-threatening. I do commend the board and the president of the board for believing that we can do more. In our views, Houston ISD is, I will close with this.
That is time, Board President.
I'll give you another 20 seconds.
Thank you. While you must listen to many voices of concern in a position to decide rigorous safety protocols, know that your decision is based on facts, experiences learned, and other districts' preventative measures, and those who are undergoing similar challenges. Consider statistical reports, health authorities, and the real loss of loved ones to COVID-19. Ultimately, your decision should reflect the safety for the over 6,000 students in our district.
Thank you. All right, next one.
Yes, sir. Mr. Luis Duran.
Mr. Bernard, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Well, to not beat a dead horse, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm talking a couple things. Last week it was addressed about the whole mask mandate, possibly defying Abbott's orders. Apparently Dallas and Houston are gonna do it. They're gonna defy his orders, so Poro's thinking about it. I know you guys talked about it last week about getting together with all the area school districts and El Paso to discuss it as well. I hope it's something that you guys strongly consider, I do think it's strongly necessary. I know we can't mandate vaccines for personal obvious reasons, but a mask, I don't think is too intrusive. With that being said, I brought up the positive test, last week in my son's first grade class. And yet when I look at the table this week that's updated on Mondays, it still shows our CR elementary for 0. I'm not sure who's updated that, obviously the information is incorrect. We even got a letter stating there was a positive case, it's still showing 0. So I was hoping this Dr. Fuentes was here, I believe she was the one that was talking about it. She's not here. So anyway, so that's not accurate. So I don't know how accurate the rest of the table is. I was just informed today, of course it's not official yet, but someone in kindergarten popped. My son's 4th grade teacher got sent home today, the teacher from the nurse's office. She went home. A couple of students from that same class went home. That teacher doesn't wear a mask. Just putting it out there. Also with the TEA stuff, I was reading that it looks like we are going to continue to do contact tracing. I hope that is the case. I know they're not mandating or requiring it anymore. And I really hope that is the case because I think it's necessary. If somebody in my kid's classroom pops again, I want to know. I want to have the ability to protect my kid. If that parent doesn't want to, whatever, they want to protect their kid, that's up to them. I want to protect my kid. I can't protect him if I don't have all the information. I hope we are doing contact tracing. With that being said, I don't know, I was reading now that even if you can opt your kid out of quarantine, even if they're a high risk exposure contact, the parent can sign their kid out, like, oh, kid will keep going. Once again, that's up to that individual parent, which I think is wrong because then that's exposing other kids and also my kid again. So I don't know where this is coming from. This is TA, but I hope, we can go against that. It's just, there's common sense. I mean, people say common sense is not that common anymore. Obviously, unfortunately, I should say, but it's just little things like this. It's like, we need a, Mr. Gordon, you were saying last week, we need to protect the kids, we're here for the kids, the students. It's not, these little things are things that should need to be done to protect the kids. So,
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Thank you. Appreciate the comments. All right. Next, is that it?
Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Stay tuned. The board will be meeting again on these issues. All right. We will now go to agenda item 3B. Sonia.
Yes, sir. Discussion and possible action related to the CISD educational specifications developed by MMK Architects. Mr. Vasquez.
Good afternoon, Board President, board members, Dr. Galaviz. The document that we presented to you is part of a larger effort to comply with policy. This is a policy requirement, but it's also a very efficient tool to provide equity to all of our campuses by creating a standard that helps all the designers that we may or may not hire in the future with what I call the launching pad of design decisions. This document was procured with the very helpful collaboration of not just community members, but also teachers, administrators, through a series of meetings that we had. We had very interesting discussions. We had a lot of input. The committee members on the second meeting felt that a lot of the comments made on the previous meeting were addressed, and so we feel confident that this is going to help the district advance the issues of equity. One thing that I remember hearing at one of the first JFK meetings was the question about the proverbial Taj Mahal when public entity builds a new building. And as an architect, I took that to heart because you know, that we are always in a situation where we know that resources are limited. And so what better way to provide designers with, you know, constraints about what is it that they can do and what should they be doing. If you give a designer an open canvas and a blank check, they're gonna they're gonna burn money like it's a rock. And so that's definitely, certainly not the extent. Now, another very important thing to keep in mind about these documents is that these are not construction documents. They are not meant to be the last word on the facilities that we end up getting for the district. If the board decides to call for the election, and if the election is successful, and as we move forward with these projects, we certainly want to continue encouraging that collaborative process with community members, with teachers and with principals to provide us with the input necessary to, you know, start from a defined starting point, but also to achieve the goals of the district, considering the vision, the mission, everything that's in those documents. I don't know if the board has any questions at the moment, but this is the information that we wanted to provide to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Board have any questions for now? Ms. Earls?
I just have a comment. You know, when I first saw this, I thought, same old stuff, I probably should print it off the internet. And then I got to page 39 and I knew that that wasn't true. I had asked in our facilities assessment, it says shade canopies. We had a long discussion in this district, those are, I think we even changed policy to say those aren't happening. Right here on page 39, these people took enough effort, did it personalized enough to us, and I really give you kudos. Outdoor learning environments shall have permanent metal canopies.
Yes.
Canvas and fabric are not accepted. So, you know, it's really, that's a good thing to hear, that I think these are going to be good documents for us.
Yes, I did talk to the architects and I said, look, we are not looking for a copy paste solution. I understand that you don't need to start from scratch, but Canutillo it's a unique district. And so take the time to meet with us, listen to us, and make sure that what you hear from us is what you put on these documents.
Well, it seems like they took their time. So thank you, that was all.
All right,
Mr.
Mr. Earls, anybody else? Mr. Rodriguez?
I do. In regards to, I mean, more because we have more elementary schools, right? And usually our elementary schools that we currently have are pretty much the same design. So in regards to square footage, all that, in regards to the equality of the campus, was that actually looked at in regards to what we currently have and then what future needs are? And how was that balanced to make sure the new elementary school, because Reyes is probably the different one versus all the other elementary schools that we've built over the.
Yes, Reyes Elementary and Canutillo Elementary follow a different layout and a different pattern. We specifically told this group of designers to not give us a definite footprint of the building, because knowing our community and considering the possibility of the location for future buildings, the topography plays a very important role. And so if you look at the footprint for Jose Damian, Garcia, Bill Childress, and Davenport, it has an X layout. And that is very efficient, but it may not work on certain topographic features. And so we, like I said, because this is not a set of construction documents, we still need to allow for that flexibility for the designers, that if we say, hey, build us a next layout footprint, and then they come back and say, well, yes, we can, but it's gonna cost you a lot more because of grading issues.
In regards to the layout, I think the conversation we've had, the conversation we've had in the past is that that might not be the most efficient, and that's why we sort of changed it in regards to Reyes, because having the 4 quadrants and then having a principal go from one hall to another compared to the high school where you're able to just walk down the hall and you're able to see every hallway instead of, so there's a lot of issues. And so I don't want to, the layout, I think that's all changing, but I want to make sure that the square footage that we have at Jose, Damian, Garcia, Canotillo, Reyes, the square footage of the library, the square footage, all that
Oh, yes.
is consistent
Mhm.
with what we currently have and then what the future needs. And did we need to balance that out, or is that workable? Because in regards to a library, we know that that is completely changing in your traditional library versus, you know, your 21st century library with all the technology.
Yes, so yes, that is workable. It is workable. This is not you know, pun intended, it's not set in stone.
No, what I'm saying is that there's some consistency, so there is equality within the campuses, especially
Right.
when we build new, but also making sure that we take into account our existing buildings. Because some of that could be scaled down, but let's create that same type of learning environment that's in the other, in regards to square footage.
Okay.
And stuff like that. Was that taken into account?
Yes, it was. In fact,
Because I
some of the, not only in terms of new technologies, but of course, we couldn't have ignored the realities of COVID. And so had we provided this document 2-3 years ago, we'd be looking at maybe a different, maybe not a completely different, but somewhat different document.
And we know it's
So-
going to be a changing document. I mean,
So
this is not set in
yes,
stone, but-
it is a document that would need to be updated as we continue working with our designers, the actual designers of record for the buildings that we may or may not build in the future.
And going back to that same question, there's other, like the art classroom, the, you know, different type of classrooms. Is there anything that we're looking at in the current specifications that's going to be for the future that we might have to address with our existing buildings to provide some equity or quality?
Yes, there is, particularly with the issue with flooring. Some of the campuses have issues with the actual finish of the floor. We believe that is because of moisture that's percolating underneath the slab. And one way to solve for that is to remove the existing finish and polish the concrete to make it look the way that it does at Reyes. And that is noted on the deficiencies for the facilities master plan. So yes, knowing that the facilities master plan was ongoing and acknowledging some of those existing deficiencies, we also made sure that, you know, some of those recommendations are included in these documents.
And that would be, those deficiencies are.
That is one of them, yes.
That those deficiencies are recommended for the bond program to address.
Addressing those deficiencies are recommended both under the facility deficiencies through the bond program and also on the document, so that in the future, you know, we avoid having those issues again.
And the main concern that I have in regards to specification, in regards to safety and security, how we address the entrance and issues like that, are those specifications included, and what is probably the optimal in regards to safety and security and how we build?
Yes, there are. In fact, I was saying before that I on purpose requested that don't give me a layout of the entire campus, but the one layout that one of the few layouts that they actually drew were for those vestibules to provide, you know, clarity that those vestibules have to be separated for visitors, that, you know, when they come into the administration offices, they don't have a clear path to the classrooms.
I saw that in the.
It's 134.
Where you have the lobby and the controlled access points.
Right, and those layouts, it's very conceptual. It doesn't mean that any architect or any engineer that comes and does drawings and construction documents for the district it's not going to look exactly like that. For a designer, it's just a very conceptual way of telling them there has to be a barrier here. There's a space available. There's this other space. There's yet another barrier. So it's very conceptual.
Mr. Rodriguez?
That's all I have for right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anybody else have any comments? I did like I guess the rendering of the PK through first classroom where, you know, the restrooms for each of them are back to back. And you kind of indented the hallway a little bit to give a little more room in those areas for the kindergartners. I thought that was a really nice touch. Give a little more
Yeah, the
concept.
the educational standards, the new paradigms of educational design has changed since the last time that the district built a brand new campus. And of course, more so with, you know, this thing that happened to everybody.
Right, and we'll be able to incorporate as we go some of those other safety and health issues into our building. Like you said, this is a conceptual and guiding, so to speak, for
Yes.
specs. Okay, anybody else?
I move to approve, Mr. Chair.
All right, I have a motion before the board on this agenda item to approve. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by the board? Hearing none, Sonia, please pull the board.
Yes, sir. Mr. Coronado,
Yes?
Mr. Hernandez,
Yes.
Mrs. Mendoza,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
and Mrs. Searles.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, Bruno. Okay. That takes us back to item 3A. Sonia?
Yes, sir. Discussion regarding the 2020 Facility Master Plan and the Just for Kids Committee final recommendations for a potential November 2021 bond election.
This is the easy one. Good evening, folks. How are y'all?
And yourself.
Good, thank you. Okay, who's going to start? Introduce everybody.
I'll start. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Galvez. I have not had the chance to meet all of you, but my name is Carl Hornbuckle. I have the privilege of working with the Just for Kids Committee through our process, helping to facilitate discussion and the presentation of all of our materials. It was a pleasure for me to get to work with this group of constituents who represent all of Canfield ISD. I'd like to further that by asking, we have many of our members who are here tonight. If all of our committee members could actually stand for a moment to be recognized. This was a very hard-working group. This was a group with a lot of questions. We did our best as facilitators and staff to answer all of those questions that were presented to us. And we've asked 3 of the committee members to speak to you all tonight and present the recommendations on behalf of the entire committee. I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves as they share their comments. So I will turn it over first to Dr. Russell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I met many of you at the last meeting, and my name is Dr. Alexis Rossi, and I am one of the Just for Kids committee members. I'm one of the spokespeople tonight. Wanted to thank you again for the time to present our work, and also for the opportunity to engage together with both the district and the community. This is something that we really prioritized across all the summer and all of the time that we spent together, was this collaboration piece and also the shared responsibility, both from the community to ask the hard questions and from the board in terms of responsibility, both fiscal and transparency wise. So we did reach a consensus. That doesn't mean that we all agreed on everything, nor does it mean that we're all in favor of everything, but we did vote at our last meeting and reach a majority consensus, which is the proposal that you all have received last week. It addressed a number of the needs that we have both in terms of existing facilities issues that was just spoken about by Bruno, but also then the future needs. So trying to think about what are we looking at with our district currently, where do we need to be able to go in the next few years, and how are we gonna get there? We also took into consideration the discussion and the questions that the board brought up at our last meeting when we were here, including ideas around fiscal responsibility, not wanting a third middle school, et cetera. So as well as you addressed taking off some of the items that had been either already adjusted in the facilities master plan or started it over the summer since the process and so forth. So what we want to be able to present today, and I'll turn it over to Rachel in just a moment, is not just the projects itself, but really the start of a very strong commitment, relationship, and consensus both between the district and the community in working together, not only for this bond, but through the future and how this bond will develop within the community and for the future of our kids. Thank you. And I'll move it to Rachel.
Good evening, board. My name is Rachel Cisneros. I'm a student at Deero High School as well as a Just for Kids spokesperson. Of course, one of the ways that we found all of the issues that we wanted to talk to you about is by going to all the campuses to see everything, all the problems and issues firsthand. So we would also really appreciate if you all could consider problems that we have seen as schools that already exist, so we can improve where students already go. And we do, as you saw before, have a list of things that we would like you to consider improving at schools that we of course already have because of the amount of students that of course go to all of those schools. But we also know that it is important to look at anything for any future needs because as you all know, we are a growing district and it is of course important to grow physically before we can grow in terms of students' learning conditions.
Pass this along to the third speaker as well.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yvette Muller, and I'm part of the Just for Kids committee, as well as a mother with 2 kids at AMS. And, you know, it was a great pleasure and an eye-opener to be part of this committee. So I just wanted to thank you all for this opportunity and Dr. Galadis for just opening this up to us because I truly enjoyed myself and learned a lot. But as Rachel was speaking about future needs, you know, we learned a lot about what comes next and what could be next with future developments. And what we learned is that some of these recommendations could really be looked at together and that they could be interdependent. So as an example, one of the proposals was for new schools, specifically a new middle school. And even the committee could not, you know, comprehend or, you know, get our arms around a third new school when we look at capacity being at only at 60% across the board. But it really challenged us to think outside of the box. And, you know, we could really get behind a new middle school to really, you know, not only upgrade the AMS facilities and capture the new residents that are behind Abundant, so that those kids wouldn't go to another school district and could capture those taxes, but only if we could repurpose AMS. So when we go through the proposal, you'll see, you know, proposal for a new middle school on the condition that we would repurpose the current AMS school, renovate it for a new district office or, you know, a new central office, potentially, you know, the Lone Star building. And so one of the things that we just wanted to make sure and convey is that as the committee, we looked at this as our checkbook as well, and what would we do to help consolidate, combine, but yet prepare us for the future. And, you know, when you talk about building a new school, my kids will already have been graduated by this point. But, you know, I really look at it as, you know, what the potential could be. It's a sense of pride for the kids. It's also, you know, how do we kind of maintain and bring equity across the school district? How do we teach more efficiently, increase productivity, and just be prepared for growth? And so I would just ask that as we look at that, we would encourage a lot of questions so that we can share feedback,
But we really did look at it from several angles to make sure that we were the best prepared, not only for the future of the children, but then the fiscal, financial responsibility for the district.
That approach also allows us to look at a phased-in approach across the years of the bond. So thinking about where can we continue to build transparency and trust within the community, because we have raised that as an issue, in terms of seeing where the money is going and making sure that it's not just the students who have their needs met, but also the faculty, staff, and our community. So in speaking to the Lone Star building, going into AMS, it would provide our staff with a safer place than with the swamp coolers and a 1940s building. But it would also provide an opportunity to expand the Project Vita in terms of the dental clinic and other community needs that we could address by having this space in AMS, but also the time to do it right, because we would have a new middle school whereby our kids would have the educational opportunities that they deserve instead of asbestos and roof leaks and so forth that we saw on our tours. So we do want to continue to emphasize the need for communication between both the district, the board, and the community, as well as we encourage you to, as my colleague mentioned, ask us questions. We're happy to participate in the discussions, and we urge you to listen to our recommendations, because we did put a lot of time and effort into that from the standpoint not only of community members and parents, but also of our faculty, our principals, and our students. So this majority vote policy, or not policy, sorry, proposal that we're presenting this evening for a vote, it reflects our fiscal responsibility, strategic planning, and our desire for transparency and responsibility of all stakeholders involved. And we also understand that this isn't the end all and be all. We know that our buildings are going to continue to need maintenance. We're going to continue to need to grow for the future of Kenneteel. But what we've tried to do is think about current needs and also immediate future needs and how we can set ourselves up for growth over time. So with that, we'd like to thank you as the district, as the board, for your support in this process, for the opportunity to be here and to make a recommendation and to help address the wrongs of the past for the future of our children.
With that, we know you've had an opportunity to hear about the work of the committee and some of the details of the contents that we've looked at. That's what's included in your board packet. We want to give you all every opportunity to ask questions of us. If you have questions about specific projects or about any of the specific content that's been included, I'm a resource along with Dr. David Peterson, who is here, who's helped to put together a lot of that data. If you want to learn more about how the committee worked, how they worked together, I've asked Dr. Rossi if she would continue to answer those questions. So with that, we just want to open it up to you all to hear your thoughts and questions for us.
All right, I'll open up to the board for questions, comments, anything. Mr. Rodriguez?
I have several, but in regards to, one of the concerns I've seen just walking by transportation, our current transportation facility, it's off of 1 Street, and if you see, was that discussed, and what options are we looking at for the future, because I didn't see anything.
If you want to address transportation.
Dr. Peterson, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the board, Dr. Galavis. The transportation, there wasn't a really discussion regarding relocating that facility. It was what's currently there and what needs to be done to it. But there was talk about land that the district had around Bill Childress, and there was talk about some land that possibly the county had in a couple areas, somewhere in some floodplain areas, that would probably take a lot of money to put bridges and things over washes to get there. So in the end, we really didn't have a deep down discussion to relocate the transportation facility. Bruno could add anything else to that.
So one thing that from the beginning, we wanted to focus our attention on the campuses, not so much on facilities and transportation or in central office. Throughout the process, though, we saw an opportunity to, come up with a solution for this building. And so that is one of the reasons why facilities is getting, the actual facilities building is getting very, very little in terms of deferred maintenance projects or any other kinds of improvements. We wanted to focus all of our attentions on the campus.
And the reason why I bring up that concern, because I'm sure it probably wasn't, one of the top items to look at, but I think it's something to look at in the future. My biggest concern is, like I said, when all this gets developed, having buses coming out of that one area in probably 2 to 3 years is probably not the best thing to do. So and that goes to sort of like central office. I think we could probably utilize AMS right now, but I don't want it stringent to, oh, you know what, we told you that was supposed to be central office. Because I think in the future, maybe in 3 to 5 years, we could possibly look at land before it gets developed, and there's certain areas, right? The middle of the district is probably right back here where the high school is, because that's where we put it. But there's possibly some land that we could look at depending, and I know I don't want to take money out of this, but I just want that discussion with the committee as something that we might want to look at later, where we could have really, if you go to Socorro and all these other districts, especially Socorro's administration building with their transportation hub right next to it, I think that's probably something optimal, and it would depend on that location. So I see the short-term need where we could either utilize AMS or the Lone Star, but also not. The other thing is looking at what size of this square footage is, what's the future square footage needs if we get built out, and what that built out would look at. So that's the communication I want with the committee in regards to that. And so something that we're going to need to look at as a board to really come up with a comprehensive way of transportation of storage and what is the, like the drop off warehouse,
Yes.
like warehouse, central office, and utilize that in the future, because as we know, part of the problem with AMS is transportation. Imagine putting buses there or, trying to, so I think that's just something that we need to communicate and have that communication early on, because it might change in the future depending what that may look like. Now, I'm okay with the middle school. I agree we don't need 3 schools, and I'm okay with being able to look at really developing a 21st century learning environment for the new middle school, and then really addressing the inequities in a future bond program, because we can't have 3 middle schools. It would need to be 2. The other issue that I see, my concern is turning in a 20 classroom building into Reyes Elementary and making that almost a high school, As we know, smaller learning environments and smaller schools, especially when looking at specifications, I would prefer, depending on what my colleagues would think, but I would prefer to be looking at another elementary school on the left side. The reason being is we know charter schools are coming, and charter schools actually look at pre-K early on and not just middle school. So I think we need to look at that gap. And if we could find a common ground to do that, maybe like the first part of half of an elementary school, and then, 3 to 4 years, then we build that out. But that's something that I just wanted to throw out there. Those are I'm okay with the middle school, but I think we would need another elementary school, and how we get there. There's different ways of doing that within the current bond program, looking at multi-purposes and not building a 20 classroom facility. So just for thought, I just wanted to throw it out there and see what my colleagues.
All right, anything else?
That's it.
Anybody else on the board? No? Ms. Searles?
Sure, I'd like to thank you all with all my heart. You have been an awesome committee. You've stuck together. You've adhered to, you know, a goal and you've brought us a really good document. And I know that it's well thought out. So I thank you and truly we praise you for what you've done and what you've presented to us. Sincerely, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ruff. Anyone else?
I would like to echo Mrs. Searle's comments. I've been with this district a long, long time, and your work and your willing to cooperate and negotiate is truly inspiring to me as a member. Many times, you know, you go home and you can go, it's like hitting my head up against the wall. But the thought and the ideas that the plan that went into this document is really wonderful. Like, I thought I'd never see the demolishment of some of these buildings that have been here since my parents. So that kind of tells me how old they are. So I just wanted to thank the committee as a whole.
Thank you. Ms. Mendoza. Anybody else? All right, yes,
I just wanted to respond, Mr. Rodriguez, to some of the comments about the elementary school in particular, because that is something that our committee talked at great length about. I think your thoughts and your comments tonight are very on point with a lot of the discussion that we had as a group. And it's great that you raised that. I'm wondering, Dr. Russell, if you want to speak to that further in terms of how the committee thought about that issue, because it was one that isn't necessarily a quick fix to the point you made. So.
Yes, so we had started off with looking at building an elementary school, but couldn't necessarily justify the cost at this point in time. However, the addition to Reyes is because the school is already overcrowded and we have some classrooms that are actually converted closets. And so we need something soon, quickly, particularly because if you look at equity issues right now, we have some special ed kids that are in converted classes for classrooms. It's not acceptable. We're also, that's one of our fastest growing campuses. And so that was one of the reasons if we could put the addition on and relieve the burden immediately and allow for that school to continue to flourish, then that was one of the things that we thought was a priority. In terms of storage and those kinds of things, multi-purpose buildings, each of the elementary campuses we voted to give each of the elementary classroom campuses those facilities as well to help further reduce burden, so that those classrooms that are currently being utilized to store, access furniture and so forth can actually be utilized for the purpose which they're intended, including classrooms. So that was it in terms of the elementary. It does not mean that we don't think that we need an elementary eventually. We had some discussion around, would it be possible to purchase land now and build later? But what we saw as another immediate need was a middle school, just because Aldo F.A. has so many issues and it's impacting student performance and the environment is not necessarily welcoming. So we thought that if we could start with the middle school and start with the expansion of Reyes, then we address the immediate needs within the community as well as give us some opportunity to expand. And then that gives us some time to address pulling Lone Star in, the central office, additional storage, and we would be demolishing Lone Star so that that also provides additional space if needed for expansion in other areas. And then also the new aspects of Aldo F.A. like the gym and so forth would be given over to Canadillo Elementary, so to also give them additional space. So we thought about it, as my colleague mentioned, in terms of kind of a package deal without saying that we would never do it. If you see the last of the future projects, it's the second one from the bottom. It says land purchase for future elementary school. We were thinking ahead in that we can't justify building an elementary school at this moment, but we want to purchase land while it's available so that we have that opportunity in the future. So that was where our conversation was, and if any of my other folks, people would like to add to it. I'm a student at Adjournment. Do you want to give your perspective? Sure.
First, I also wanted to emphasize that it is important that Reyes would have a new building, even though it would seem better to just completely build a new elementary. It is, as we said before, over capacity, and even if the building wouldn't be filled up immediately, it would, because not only is it over capacity, there's also a long list of people that are waiting to go there but cannot because we don't have any room. And as for AMS, although we did go to see AMS and what it's like physically, I do have the experience of what it was to be a student there, and there were some things, there were classrooms that were half classroom, half storage. There, in some gyms, there were places that were just full of desks and we couldn't use the locker rooms. We could only use about half of it because it was also used as storage. Not to mention, there were times where we couldn't use certain bathrooms or certain hallways because they were under inspection. It's just things that make school life harder than it was supposed to be. So it is important that we do look at renovations or just improving the quality of AMS, because not only is it important just to maintain it, but it is just making it harder for students that are already going there if it doesn't get fixed soon.
And I agree. I actually was a student there at AMS, and the only two new buildings are the library and the athletics. So I understand the complexities, especially when we were trying to get in and out of practice, or, especially the fine arts. Thank God we were able to add that. I do agree that building is so antiquated and not conducive to a 21st learning environment, especially for y'all. So I thank, and I forgot to thank you all. I really do appreciate the work. We've done this throughout the years, and we know the amount of work that you all put in, so we appreciate that. The question going back to Reyes and to the multi-purpose buildings, is that what you were referencing, the multi-purpose buildings for the elementary schools?
Right, so each elementary school would get a multi-purpose building. We wouldn't have to build one for Canutillo because it would get Alvarete, but all of the other campuses would get one, so that would help in terms of the storage issue and free up those classroom spaces, including Reyes would have that additional wing and a multi-purpose area.
So the reason being, just my thought process on this, I know looking at the capacity that we have at our elementary schools, we do have capacity to grow, and there will be some growth in those areas where hopefully it helps fill that capacity. But going back to our elementary schools capacity, and I guess if you could address this, or the middle school and the elementary school's capacity, and then where Reyes is at, and what that building would make it look like. Is that, I'm thinking it's probably 600 across. Some are, I mean, the capacity is 600, we're not full capacity, but then we're adding a 20 classroom, which is another 2 to 3. Can you go over those numbers?
I can speak to it generally. You can give some more specificity, but because of the way Reyes was originally conceived, there's an opportunity there to create some of those additional teaching spaces, classroom spaces, while the rest of the building's core facilities, its cafeteria, its gymnasiums, were already anticipated having additional classrooms added over time. There were different thoughts about what grade levels that campus might hold. So right now, the thinking coming from the committee is, let's add that space to further support our elementary grade levels and not create space for middle schoolers instead. I just wanted to clarify also that this opportunity with the multipurpose additions at the core of the other elementary campuses, there is comparable space that Reyes already has and wouldn't necessarily be receiving this. But if you think about it, it's because the elementaries have cafeteria gyms that do double duty. And so while it does alleviate some storage and some support needs, it also has a very direct impact in curriculum and student experience. So it's not just a back of house purpose. It does have a functional purpose as well. terms of education.
And safety and security reasons as well. So especially when it's 100 degrees outside and we didn't anticipate that, having a multi-purpose area so that children can be inside if others are eating instead of that shared space, things like that.
Dr. Peterson, what is that capacity number at Ray's Elementary student capacity?
Ray's capacity number is right around 600, just under 600. And it's right there, it's pushing it. I think it's probably closer to, we may have that, Dr. Galvin, because I run the numbers.
Right now, the enrollment is 595 kids, and so they're at capacity right now.
Yeah, they're just a little over capacity.
Yeah.
And this would add another, roughly, looking at it, upwards of 350 to 400 students as a possibility. You got to remember, Reyes was originally designed as a K-8, and it had an additional wing. That additional wing for the middle school was never constructed. So there's some infrastructure and things there, and that was the thought, was because that was designed that way originally, this would make it a little more efficient, a little more economical to be able to put a wing there. Yes, it'll be a larger school. It'll be larger than your other elementary schools. But that was a conscious decision that was felt to have the relief of that. And then to get the future land for a future elementary school as the growth continues, because we see the growth continuing. Some of the other schools will fill up, and then you're going to need an additional piece of property over on the other side of the freeway. So that was the idea with the developments there. With the multi-purpose rooms, as Bruno talked about, with the educational specs that you approved, those are guidelines. And part of those guidelines is equity and bringing equity to the schools to make sure that they have those multi-purpose rooms. Because if you've ever been in one of these schools during lunchtime, you've got the PE teacher trying to hold PE class, and then on the other side, you've got the kids trying to have lunch, and you got balls, unfortunately, sometimes go across from PE into the lunch, and that's not a good combination either. So besides having it hot outside, or when you have adverse weather, you also now have a facility that you can hold those types of programs in. And also, if you wanted to do some small programs with, like, let's say the kindergartners for a parent night, now you have a defined space that you could have a kindergarten program in there for a parent night that would be easily adaptable. So there's a lot of flexibility in putting those multi-purpose rooms in the schools.
So I think that we're on the same page with you in terms of the future planning, and that's why we added in the land purchase for the future elementary school. But we felt that given the current needs, we wanted to focus on the expansion at Reyes and the elementary school to bring it up to the 21st century, while having the land available to, in the future, build that elementary school as we see how the rest of our district develops and grows, and then where how we can best address those needs.
I guess the other thing going back to Reyes is also, we know that that was supposed to be a pre-K originally, and then Dr. G does not support pre-K, it's right from our conversation. And I don't either, but that the conversation was, well, then why don't we just build 2 pre-Ks? And then it's, I'm with the committee on the middle school. I'm just trying to figure out how we could, because my concern is the safety as well as the competition of charters if we were to get a charter in that area. And what happens is they start early, right? They're looking at pre-K through K and first, so that way they could get them in and then go into the middle school. So I see that more as a bigger fear for me. I think I welcome that competition. I think we're going to do a way better job. We've done it thanks to our staff and our administration, but I don't want in a year or two, it's like, oh, they're building this right there. And it's like, oh, you know, we're 2-3 years out. And then we have some serious issues with
Well, and that's exactly why we decided we needed the land purchase now, so that we were already kind of staking our claim and showing the incoming communities that we had that in terms of development. Also, and please correct me if I am wrong, but in a past discussion, we talked about in terms of where we drop students, and one of the big areas where we drop them is between elementary to middle. And so we were hoping that by having a brand new beautiful middle school that really addresses the 21st century learning needs, as well as the newer Reyes that has expanded, that we're keeping all of those kids in the community who love Reyes and giving them a chance to stay in the district rather than losing them at elementary school and losing them at middle school and having to try to recruit them back at high school. So that was part of the integrated strategy that we had addressed is for exactly those reasons. We understand that there will be competition coming and we want to make sure that we're ready for it.
The other question that I have in regards to how much would an elementary school cost?
Again, it depends on what size you want to design it for, but typically an elementary school is going to be over $20 million.
Mr. Chair.
Give me a second, Ms. Sharp.
And the other question that I had, Bruno, we just approved the specifications. Did we look at making sure the multi-purpose is in the specifications for future elementary schools, if included? I mean, not necessarily a multi-purpose, but we're gonna build, we say Reyes has that multi-purpose type of facility, right? And if we were here, we would address inequities by providing the other because Canotio Elementary doesn't have one, but the other 5. So in the future, in regards to the specifications, we're looking at multi-purpose facilities as well as a cafeteria within elementary schools.
Yes.
Okay.
That will continue to be the standard for the district.
I guess my biggest concern is at elementary school, but I think it's a shared concern, and how we would want to address that is I'm a little bit more comfortable. What I was gonna propose is let's do the multi-purpose facility. Let's build a smaller and let's phase out a small elementary, 1 phase at that side, and then we look at a second phase once we go out to the next bond. But I see where we need to address some inequities, but that's my concern is just at elementary school. And I don't know what we want to look at. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you again.
All right.
I
thank you, Mr.
apologize for so many questions.
No, we appreciate it. We want to
Ms.
see
Searles.
When talking about land purchase, has anyone discussed with the administration or the administration discussed with the city? There's 4,000 acres of city-owned land in the Northwest Development Plan. And that's city land, that's not developer land. And I don't hear any talk of it whatsoever to buy at city prices. That's government entity to government entity. You're paying significantly. I'm sure these gentlemen could give even a more specific reduction in price than paying for developer property. And that's what we've got with this developer property. And I have a problem with that. That's not being a good steward that we haven't looked for. It's not against, I mean, I'm sure you all don't even know that's there. But it is there. It's 4,000 acres of land. And, you know, the city's kind of led us to the table, you know, a little bit sometimes and then knocked us away. I think we're foolish if we don't pursue it. It's in our school district. It's going to be our people that are there. And we're not taking advantage of pre-developer prices. So I have a problem with that.
Mrs. Rose, if I might, we are putting together a document that will allow us to be on the open market to receive any and all available options for purchasing land. We're not just solely looking at land that developers have available. If the
Well, I've
city.
already heard we've got a spot picked out.
No, we haven't. We've identified it so far, but we have made no commitments. with-
I understand, but I know how things go.
Mhm.
And that seems to run the course. So what I'm saying is that we're not tapping into the 4,000 acres of public service corridor. It's in the northwest corner of our district.
Yes, so what I'm saying is that my understanding of, and unfortunately, Mr. Blanco's not here, he could probably provide more information. But what my understanding of the situation is that this document is going to allow us to consider the possibility of not just going with a single developer, but to consider any and all options for land available in those areas.
In other words, more than one area has been identified, not just one. I understand, but we have not reached out to the city
Not,
to say
not as
we
of
want.
today.
No,
Right.
we want to be, we want 100 acres of land.
Mhm.
And this has been before the board before, and like I said, everything that's around it a little bit. I think we're not to be jumping on that.
I see what you're saying, I understand.
So that's what I'm getting at. I have a problem, and I know everybody's tried to make it right. But we have 2 middle schools that are not even at close to full capacity. My children went to both of them, all 3 boys went pre-K, or not pre-K, K to 12, Proud Eagle graduates. But we have 2 middle schools that are pretty complex. I mean, yeah, they need help. They've got deferred maintenance. But what I see, even if we, okay, Alderante's no more, it's gonna be repurposed to another building. We're not putting enough money into CMS. We're leaving them off as, oh, well, don't worry about that. It's the other school. I don't see that as being equity. When I look at the numbers in here, everything from CMS is lower than the others. We need help too. And I'm not seeing that reflected in here. They need a lot of help. They need a new gym. They need new, name it. It isn't reflected in here, and I think that's a horrible inequity that the people on the other side of the freeway would get a brand new school. The people on this side of the freeway would be left with this thug man. It's okay, it's good enough. I
Dr.
don't-
Peterson, I don't know if you want to address that first for CMS. That's certainly not the. That's
No,
not the-
I don't think it's the intent at all, but it's when you just look at the numbers,
Mhm.
health and safety, we won't compare CHS, it's big. But you've got AMS, we're gonna put $739,000 into it. CMS, 491,000. You've got educational space, only 855,000 for CMS. They need way more help than that. Wall, ceiling, and flooring, AMS, 801,000, CMS, 266,000. That's not enough. So I see a minor problem with that. I'm sure we've always found a way to, adjust things, but I see that as a problem. I talked to Dr. Galavis about a week ago. I totally agree, Reyes needs a wing. Believe it or not, I have blueprints for Reyes to totally even build it out to a middle school. But I asked if indeed we didn't pass a bond now, not ever, because we need a bond. These things need to be done. But if we didn't pass this bond, could we build that wing on Reyes? Would we be financially capable? And he indicated, yes, we could do that. I see that as like we ought to have been starting it probably this summer. That should have been just jump started. But we can do that. And I think we need to do that immediately. We've got some things left out of here. We've got code compliance in front of the high school. We've got a whole sidewalk that needs to be built to comply with city code. It's not included anywhere. It's a lot of money. We've also got the obvious. We got COVID. We got people who don't have jobs. We got people who maybe had to get other jobs that weren't as good at jobs. We've all got taxes. Everybody, show of hands, everybody get a property tax bill? Did it put a big smile on your face? No, it didn't. Is this the right time for us to ask for more? I don't know. We're not going to get a property tax bill like that this next year. We were appraised this year. It's not going to happen next year. So there'll be some breathing room for our voters, which is all of us.
And we, just to add to that, we did take that into consideration that due to that our tax rate wouldn't change. Now the taxes that we pay obviously could change with the appraisal, but the rate could stay the same. So this bond proposal was done at the max capacity that we were already at to not ask for an increase. So kind of an apples to apples comparison just to take, you know, where it is now and leave it at that same rate to pay for these things.
But the tax rate will stay the same, but your tax bill won't.
No, because of the appraisal, right,
Exactly,
right.
your tax bill, and believe it or not, you know, it might even, you never know, it could go down
No,
even.
so
I would doubt it, but
You're
you know.
on the central, maybe you can convince them not to raise the
No,
property tax
because
or
they
value so
can't.
much every
It's a
year.
state thing, it's a property value study that goes on. And each district has to be at a level for the property value that's assigned by the state to get, it's very long and confusing, but to get the money that we get from the state. So, yes, I agree with you on
Yeah,
that, but
because,
it
what
isn't
they do
gonna
is
happen.
in the past, they would, you know, just, there was no sense or reason to their property values.
Well, but let's put it bluntly, this year, the norm is 19,000 protests every year. There's
Mhm.
38,000 protests this year.
Yep.
Nobody's happy.
And
But-
Mr. Earls, I'd like to say that, you know, the key was maintaining the tax rate, and you're right.
That's correct.
Valuations will go up, but you also need to consider there's a lot of development going on. So those developments and the value of those homes will be added to the tax rolls, which will again help balance it out so those rates will not go because of that. You'll have more assessed valuation added overall.
Absolutely.
That means there's more people that will be paying in, so you're not going to see that big of an impact because of that. So that's why the key was to maintain the tax rate. And then as the other developments are going on and those are being added to the tax rolls, that helps absorb any of that increase. And so actually there's a balance there. And I mean, you know that with the work that you've done. It's a tricky balance, but the key is I don't think it'll go up as much as people think, just because you're going to have more properties and more assessed valuation overall added to the district. And for CMS, I want you to know that we do have some flexibility in here. We've seen some of that. And in fact, there's a few projects that are in here that would go away with a new middle school being built. And that money would be put towards CMS, because one of the ideas was we have to have some equity. And so we need some flexibility. And so we have the overall categories, and then we have the sub projects below. And there's a little bit of flexibility in those that we could do to make sure that we target some funds, because we realize you're going to have people going, wait a minute, I have a middle school up here and I have a middle school down here, and they're not quite the same. We can never make CMS a new school because it's not a new school, but we can make it equitable. So that it is equitable to what a new middle school would be.
Well, I have to be honest with you, my personal opinion is that school probably needs somewhere around $20 million to make it equitable to a new school, which I don't think $38 million is enough to make this state-of-the-art 21st century learning school. I don't think that that's enough money either in that, to be very frank with you, especially on tomorrow's market. Anybody been to Lowe's to lift to buy some wood? It's not true. And that's today's market. Tomorrow's market's going to be a
And we
different
look at
market.
that, and we also are designing the schools for the right size. So that's important too. So that we don't overbuild a middle school to have it sit at 65, 70% capacity. So we're going to make sure that we do things right and take the time. And so the ed specs will help. Working with the architects in the community will help to pull all that together.
And the other thing that happens is nothing ever runs to budget.
Well, I can tell you that, you know, for 30 years, I've done bonds and I've been very successful, and I've been very happy to say I've never missed a deadline and I've never had a budget that we couldn't meet. Took a lot of work, took a lot of effort. We rolled up sleeves and we had to be creative, but we made it happen. And that's our commitment to Canateo, is the kids deserve it. So we've got to make sure that we do that. We need to build buildings, facilities that are functional. They don't need to win awards in magazines. They need to be functional. And
I
that's
think
the
you
key.
can look around Canyon, that's the precise
Absolutely.
theme that our entire district goes by.
And I'm proud that these facilities are that functional.
And that's why our elementary schools are footprints.
And
Because we
you
didn't want to
also
spend-
see the results of the academic performance in this district because of it too.
Yeah, it's
They're
good.
doing doggone good work.
It's excitingly good. So, you know, those are my concerns, committee. I hope you understand, and it sounds like we had some of them too. I'm just not sure the time is right. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Earls. Anybody else? All right.
I
Mr.
just
Rodriguez, one
have
last-
one. I let it go. The other concern was, I've been at several career technology facilities and I think this might be a bridge for us to be able to develop those programs in high need. The biggest thing, and that's gonna be a discussion in future board, is do we build two traditional high schools? Or are we able to be really creative on how we build this high school? And then my thought process is campuses around there. Like, how do we build a medical school working with Texas Tech? With, you know, how do we create these academies where we're really creating future ready students? So I think that's a discussion we're gonna have. And I said, okay, you know what, we'll go with this career and technology building. And then in the future, hopefully we're able to build those programs and grow them where we could really build a facility where it's state of the art. And I'm sure we could do something creative with the building, but I was thinking some of the facilities I've seen, it's like, whoa, it's not, but I appreciate the work and I think this will be a bridge for that. And I think going back to the middle school, I think one of the most important things is once we build that middle school and then looking at the future middle school or CMS is how do we really turn that into a 21st century when we're building that elementary school too. So I think we could really transform our district. I know Isleta is one of the oldest school districts, and I think they've probably done the best in regards to how they've developed their bond programs and how they really transformed their campuses. And it wasn't just in one bond program. So that's where I've been. I was trying to get everything in one, but you all did a lot of good work and I appreciate it. So.
In terms of responding to kind of both of those.
Can you get the microphone, Dr. Ramos?
Sorry about that. So in terms of responding to both of those comments, we also had to consider that there are a lot of people hurting right now, and so is now the right time. But also in terms of considering tomorrow's market, knowing that we would pay more. And so being concerned about that, and that's one of the reasons why we put the land purchase in now for both of those schools, even if we only develop one. So thinking about that and knowing that we can't do everything and trying to prioritize and come to a consensus about what the biggest needs are right now without leaving anybody out. So we don't want to have a district of have and have-nots, but we also don't want to lose out to competition and then make the entire district suffer for that. So in terms of looking at the current inequities between CMS and Alderete, Alderete has a lot more issues that need to be addressed soonest for health and safety reasons. And when we're looking at the costs, we were worried about, okay, what happens when you start pulling out those asbestos lockers? And we can't do that when school's in session, for example, and things like that. So while I understand the point of that that we want to make sure that CMS is also equitable, there are a number of components here in terms of updating it in the meantime, even if we can't transform that because we have to transform the other to save money in the end, because that meant that we didn't have an extra multi-purpose building to build. We didn't have to do an admin building. We didn't have to renovate Lone Star. So it was like a give and take in a lot of ways to try to set us up not only for the current needs, but also the future, recognizing the concerns that both of you have. We had some shared discussion around that as well, and this was the best that we could have for the time being, understanding that those concerns are going to exist in the community, and we wanted to be able to justify how we're spending money.
May I add something as well in terms of timing? I think you're making a very important point for your community and really, let's face it, communities everywhere in terms of time. It is a tough balance. We talked about that is this the right time? We agreed we'd bring this recommendation to you all. Unfortunately, you all have the heavy lifting to do ultimately. And I think in part it's related to the other point you made about the dilemma that our construction costs, our land purchase prices are only going to get more expensive. So if this isn't something that that you all decide is right for the district now. If now's not the right time, it's not that these needs necessarily go away. And so in the long run, if we say, you know what, let's wait, let's put this off, by the time we come back to this issue, everything will be more expensive. So you end up sort of fighting yourself between these two very real concerns. And there isn't ultimately, at the end of the day, one right solution. So that's why I think we worked with the committee to come forward with this recommendation at this time, acknowledging that we're in a climate where it isn't a slam dunk.
There was some lost sleep.
Yeah.
And there will be either way,
Yeah.
right? You're gonna question if it's the right decision.
Yeah.
Your checks are in the mail.
Mr. Chair, the other thing is interest rates going up too. so.
Correct. And just how quickly things are being built up on both sides of the highway and knowing that yes, maybe there's a lot of land issues from now, but in a year or two, there's not going to be. And so just some of those concerns, but also trying to balance what do we really need to get done now? How do we get set up over the next few years for further transforming the district in the future? And what were some of the things that had to go? And we didn't all agree on what had to go, but we had to drop stuff. And that was where we came up with this compromise of, okay, El Dorate goes, but we build new, but then we have that space in El Dorate to better serve the community in different ways in terms of central office, Lone Star clinics, potentially a new library, all of those types of things in the meantime.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. Why was they decided to get rid of the central office? What's wrong with it?
That issue actually came up sort of concurrent to the work of our committee, because I think there's an opportunity that the district has seen with regards to this facility. So that wasn't an idea that came from within the committee. It was something that was discussed sort of in parallel to the committee's work. And I don't know, Bruno or Dr. G, if you want to say anything further about central office itself,
Yes.
about this facility?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the focus of our work was meant to go to the campuses, not to administrative offices. For tourists, one time we got a call from our realtor and said, hey, there is a group interested in taking a look at the central office building. And so they came in, they took a look around and they showed interest in purchasing the facility. We said, well, it's not in the market, but that's when we began bringing the idea forth of the possibility of doing something with central office. We know that the building itself, it's not conducive to the best operations. There are patchwork renovations here and there. And even before we had met with these third party, we had begun to receive several requests from various departments regarding the options to renovate the
So
building.
basically, somebody wants to buy this facility. So if that happens, then that was our plan.
Well, second question to that is land purchase for central office is $6,500,000. My guess is we're not gonna get that much money for this building.
We voted it down.
That's
Yeah, we voted. it
Oh,
down.
that's not
included in
happening?
the
Thank
proposal.
you.
It's a
Because I was
process.
gonna say, elementary school's
Yeah.
only getting
No.
4.5.
And I was also going to mention the problems that we always have with the parking. That will continue to be a problem with this building. Unless the people are interested in purchasing here in, but
It's fine. So in terms of being agile to the opportunities that were presented while we were discussing, again, being fiscally responsible of if there's already a buyer, can that money then be utilized for towards something else, rather than kind of paying out to the building or build or buy a new land purchase? And we did not want to lose the space that Alberta is on, but we also didn't want to have to purchase more land for central offices. We didn't think we were being good stewards of the finances in that sense.
Thank you.
So we kind of made a compromise with the opportunities that existed at the time.
And there was no talk of just until that it was that was it, that would be central office, not that would be central office, just until we can
Oh, no.
do something
It was
else.
conditional, like we would be in favor of a new middle school if we transformed AMS into central office Lone Star.
Yeah, and
So,
all the,
yeah,
Kind of a community.
yeah, I
hub,
understand.
To get the value.
to get the
I get it.
value out of
Okay.
it, and yeah.
Okay.
And Dr. G made us a commitment that as long as he was superintendent, that promise would be fulfilled.
That's very good.
Discussion.
Going back,
You weren't going to
Hold on just a
support
second.
of that, so are you? Thank you,
Right.
that was relief, okay, yes.
All right, thank you, Ms. Earls. Mr. Rodriguez, you had one other comment?
just going back to the administration building. One is, we know this isn't a conducive administration building. It's been like that for years. We've had discussion of purchasing property next to it to actually try to address some of the issues that we've seen. Is AMS short-term, long-term? What is it? And looking at the square footage, departments are asking more. What's that gonna look at in the future? But I think that's a future discussion, and that's why I don't want that, that contingency. And depending on that discussion we have in the future, what that may look at. But that's where I just,
There's additional available space with the new science building that could be utilized for IT, the district servers, student records in that area, and then splitting up the main building. There's more square footage than between.
yeah, well, that building is so old that we
There's a
know.
lot of ability to do some things there that would be pretty creative.
Well, I just want to make sure that that's communicated, that it might change depending on the future needs of the district and looking at transportation, warehouse. How do we really, because that wasn't discussed on that, and I want to make sure we come up with something so that way it's not like, oh, we told you and this wasn't, in the future. It's like, how do we really come up with a administrative facility that addresses a need once the build out is completely done?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I personally, sorry for the miss, but the only thing that I would add is the concern with the transparency of if the bond is passed, that we do what we say we're gonna do. So we understand the need to be agile and that plans may change and we may need to adapt. But the communication, not only, to the committee, but to the community and why we're making those changes and how it's gonna serve them in the future, I think would be a critical piece. For us, we couldn't get to a new school unless we could repurpose AMS. So if it's not for central office, there would be, I would say, a strong need that we repurpose it for something else within the district so that we get the full value out of it. And so that's all I would, we know that the best laid plans, don't come to fruition. But I would just want that communication and transparency.
Of course.
All right, anybody else? All right, well, I want to thank all of you. I know it's easy work you guys went through, right? There's 7 of us. How many of you were there in the committee? 20-something? 45? Made it a lot easier, right? Now you get a little taste of what we have to go through. And I understand that not everybody's in agreement, but I really want to thank you for your work. I know it takes a lot of time to do this. You guys have given us some great input and done a lot of work. I want to thank our experts that served on the committee as well. We can't do that. We couldn't have done this without help from the community because it's really difficult for us to sit here and have this two-way speak, so to say, about what issues we're dealing with. So it's great that we have the committee to hash out a lot of those issues that you guys thought out. And, let us make some of the other decisions. I think you guys have put a great proposal together. But guys, think about this. For those people that are, not complete, not everybody's going to be happy, right? Not everybody's going to be happy with this. But think about it, guys, this isn't the end all. Okay, this is what our best situation is for now. You know, are we not gonna be able to get to everything? No. Yeah, there's just not enough money, right? We'd love to get to everything. And I would love the standalone career technology building, you know? That's the ideal. You know? But we have to live with reality, right? And so in the future, you know, maybe we can have that. And in the future, Ms. Searles, we may need to do a new, completely new CMS. Why not? You know, things aren't permanent, right? We have to progress, you know, do what we can at the time that we can do them, make the best decision for now. You know, it's really hard to live down 10 years down the road and say, well, in 10 years, we're going to do it. Well, pretty tough, you know, look how things changed in the last year and a half, you know, how much more expense, how much more thought we had to put into now our instruction, our buildings, you know, the safety issues, the HVAC, lighting, everything. It's difficult choices, but I think we've got a great plan, and thank you guys for, you know, for putting in the time. You guys don't get paid what we do. It's a joke, guys. Oh, come on. So, you know, we really, you know, you're taking time away from your family, and it's, you know, how long did y'all meet for at these meetings? How long did y'all take?
Meetings ranged from minimum of, I'd say, 2 hours to over 3 hours.
You know, and that's, you know, and having all those people there, that's, you know, that's quite a success to do 3-hour meetings like that. So you know, we appreciate your service to the community. I think we have a great plan. You guys have thought this out. I think what some of the board members and then maybe staff is talking about, that we need a little flexibility in things, because obviously, you know, the best, like you said, the best laid plans just sometimes don't come about, right? Things come up. We're trying to make the best that we can with what we have before us now. And I really think if we don't do this, we're going to miss the boat, because right now we can get some free money, basically. If we sell our bonds right now, the interest rate we're going to pay is ridiculously low compared to if we do it 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road. It's just going to be, we're getting a lot more money for, you know, right now because of the interest rates. I think this is you know, it's a no-brainer. Do what we need to do, what we, you know, with the plan we have. We're basically getting, you know, great rates on this money. Going to keep our rate down. Obviously, I think like Dr. Peterson mentioned, and this has happened in the past, when we passed the bond, we've told the community, you know, it could go up to this rate, and it's never gone up to that rate, because obviously the new development kind of defrays some of those increases in the taxes and the tax rate. Over the last couple of years, Mr. Mejia, we've been able to make payments, right, on our bonds.
We've been able to cash the debt early. We've been able to refund for savings, taking advantage of the low interest rate bond payments.
Yeah, so again, it's a working process. We're always trying to do our financial advisors to keep on top of that to save us money. And right now, we've got a great opportunity for, you know, this is the biggest bond proposal in the history of Pennsylvania. I mean, it's nearly $200 million. There's 6,000 plus students, right? Yeah, it's a big undertaking. But man, we don't have this kind of opportunity by not raising the tax rate. We're getting this kind of money. I mean, this really could give us a shot in the arm, so to speak, and get going. So I really want to thank everybody involved, staff, Bruno, Marty, everybody on our staff for all the work that you've done. It takes a lot to do put something like this together. I mean, when did we start doing this? June?
Spring of last year.
Is it
We started the committee in May.
May? 3 months roughly? Yeah. That's a lot, that's a lot. It's a lot of planning. Actually, sometimes it takes even longer. And so in this environment, you know, I really want to thank you guys for your service, everybody involved. I think we've got a great plan. We've talked to our council and our financial advisors about the flexibility up at the bond. We understand what the community wants and the committee wanted about some of those concerns, and we want to get value. Obviously, we want to get value out of all that. That's what we're going to do, and that's what's going to happen. We promise you the board that, you know, we don't look at these things just nilly-willy, that, oh, this is, you know, it's tough decisions, you know, really tough decisions. But, you know, we're in this for the, you know, betterment of opportunities of our kids, you know. What better place do we have to put our money as a community, huh? So, okay, anybody else?
So I would just like to echo what I think the rest of the board has said, and thanking you guys for all the hard work that everyone's done. But I would like to say I had some of the same concerns that Mr. Earls had in regard to the equity of Canotio Middle School. And I know it was said earlier that a lot of the buildings, especially ones built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, right? Canotio Middle School, as I'm sure you guys know, was built in probably the 80s or 90s. And 74? Oh, even.
I was a freshman when we first entered that school, Kristen, so don't talk about
So when the dinosaurs were out.
don't talk about my age.
No, and you guys answered any of the issues and any of the qualms that I had in regards to the equity of the middle school. However, it was said that with the acquisition and the building of the new middle school, that some of the funds could be alleviated and sent to the middle school for to build that equity. And I don't need any kind of like specific numbers, but do you guys have an estimate of that, just by chance, just ballpark at this moment? And it doesn't, I'm not gonna hold you guys to, like, it's not gonna be like, oh, you said this, but just a ballpark estimate.
I'd have to run through those numbers and send it, so.
Okay.
But obviously, we're gonna maximize, we've heard you loud and clear, Ms. Earls, and Ms. Tristan, so we're gonna maximize what we can to make that happen.
Okay.
You know, Tristan, thank you for that. We do want to make this equitable, but we also need to think down the road. You know, do we want to put a lot of money into CMS if later down we may knock part of it down to build a newer facility? You know, that's down the road.
Yeah.
You know, that's down the road. Or do we want to turn that area that we have the barn there and that the ag facility, or do we want to make that an ag career tech center and then build another middle school? Everything isn't, you know, set in stone down the road, guys. This is what we have to deal with right now. We can deal with those issues. We'll have to deal with those issues. We'll have to deal with those issues down the road. But there's other ways to deal with that, you know. Maybe you don't get everything they need right now, but maybe they get a new middle school down the road. Or we get another middle school somewhere else and we get a career tech center. And we get both career tech centers. An ag one down there where we can level it down and have some parking space. I don't know. Is that the future? Who knows? Maybe into botany. You know, we've got, I hear a lot of states are legalizing some kind of plants. Hey, you never know. Think about that. That part. Knock down Canotio Middle School, build another middle school, and have a
Let's not have that at
botany program. Have a dedicated botany program, guys. Don't laugh.
And so we did agree on the CTE building and know that that's important too, so we did support that in this bond. And in terms of the flexibility, you know, that's been brought up a few times, so I do want to address it before we close, but we tried to equalize both the need for being agile and flexible and not knowing what's going to happen over the next few years with COVID, right? Also with the need that the community has for transparency and a sense of responsibility and commitment to a promise from the board. And so if you review that legal language, in terms, it's two propositions, and each proposition has some specificities in there in terms of what the committees propose. So for example, new CT building and middle school, et cetera, but it also allows for some flexibility in there, as well as paying back some of the current debt. So it just tries to strike a balance, and I can't say that it makes everybody comfortable. It probably doesn't, in terms of the community will feel that you have too much flexibility. You will feel that you are tied in too much. This was one way to make sure that the community needs were addressed, as well as providing flexibility in the district, knowing that there were some potential changes.
Oh, great, and I think we've got a workable plan. So, all right, anybody else? Thank you all very much.
Oh, I
Stay
got one.
tuned.
Thank
Ms.
you, Dr.
Searles.
Galavis.
Ms. Searles.
We didn't thank you. You went to all those meetings, you led the charge. Thank you, Dr. Galavis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Searles. All right, so yeah.
Yes, sir. Item 3C. Consideration and approval of an order calling a bond election to be held by the Gunnville Independent School District, making provisions for the conduct of a joint election and resolving other matters incident and related to such election.
Okay. We've heard the proposal, the committee, our staff, our experts. Board, any questions for anybody anymore on this item? Mr. Mejia, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us exactly what the financial situation for these bonds, if the board approves this, would be in the very near future, and how that proposal for selling them might be?
Absolutely. I'll do my best to.
Putting you on the spot, but just give us an overbreath.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to see you, President Coronado, and members of the board, and Dr. Galavis. I mean, all the credit goes to your staff, to be honest with you. To even be in the position that the district is in at the moment, to call a almost $200 million bond election is due to the hard work that they really put in. Between Dr. Galavis and Ms. Pekarsky, we've been working on this for quite some time, preparing the district for a potential bond election, whether it was going to be in 2018, 2019, 2020. The goal was to prepare and build capacity. And so every year for the past 5 years, we've been presenting refunding opportunities, easing debt early, things of that nature to take advantage of the low interest rate environment that we are in, as well as build capacity for today. So the plan is, real briefly, is it can be about a 5-year financing plan. What we did is we built a model to reflect the $187 million bonds and spaced it out over a few years. We use very conservative assumptions and very conservative growth rate assumptions. You know, there has been some dramatic increases in your property values recently, and we can't assume that that is going to maintain. And so we had to cut back and use a conservative approach. So what you saw in the previous presentation and in this bond order is what we believe to be the worst case scenario, right? The overall goal was to maintain the tax rate. That's being achieved through lowering of the M&O side, a slight increase on the INS side, the net though to the taxpayers to maintain that tax rate. It is possible that there may be a decrease. It's possible that property values will go up significantly and we may not have to increase the INS side and be able to fund the full bond election. I think if you recall in 2013, the last time the district called a bond election, it asked the voters to go up to, I believe, 43 cents, I believe. And the district was able to maintain that 36-cent tax rate on the INS side for several years and finance that entire bond election. And so the plan is very simple. If the voters do approve the bond election, we will work with Dr. Galavis and Ms. Pekarsky and the rest of the staff to determine the appropriate time to enter the market. But like you mentioned earlier about interest rates, they are at all-time lows. Like Ms. Searles mentioned earlier, lumber is not getting cheaper. And so time is of the essence, and I think we will develop a plan that will maximize the district's dollars and minimize the impact on your taxpayers. I can definitely answer anything more specific. That's kind of the plan going forward.
Would it be, and my question is here, because obviously we don't know, if we get into sometime next year, rates may be going up considerably. Is it feasible for us to sell the majority of the bonds early? I know might get into an arbitrage issue. Is that correct?
Yes, it is feasible to sell the majority of the bonds early. I would, from back of the envelope math, I would keep that number around 100 million. And I think that should be enough to keep the district afloat, or to keep the projects afloat during the construction phases of the project. And then we can just evaluate and see, okay, how fast is, Bruno spending the money? If he's spending it very fast, then maybe we can look at utilizing some other type of financing mechanism. We've asked Mr. Braden to include the ability for the district to utilize some very innovative financing techniques in the bond order. And if allowed to do so, that could potentially buy the district some additional time and yet give you guys the funds that you need to implement the whole entire bond program. I think we're using, in this case, we're going to use 21st century bond financing mechanisms as opposed to 20th century mechanisms that we did in the past. We're bringing kind of Theo up to speed with the way advanced school districts are doing these bond collections, which is exciting because ultimately what it means for you all is lower tax burdens, better facilities for your students, and it's a win-win for everyone.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Rodriguez.
I just have one question in regards to our bonding capacity. What is our full bonding capacity at this point? I know the staff and Just for Kids has really worked to making sure there's not a burden on tax increase in regards to the rate, but what is that bonding capacity? So it doesn't.
That's a great question. So the state requires that all school districts across the state maintain an INS tax rate that's below 50 cents. Right, we have to stay under that 50-cent cap. So let's assume the district increased their INS tax rate to 50 cents, right? So go from 36 to 50 cents, that buys us, that's 14 pennies of additional INS tax debt. Your total capacity at that point is somewhere in the range of 350 to 400 million, right? Assuming we could finance these projects over a 7-year period. It's possible to go even higher than that, but then we really need to get creative, and it could cause some pressure on the INS.
So when, let's say if a community member would ask, well, I guess the concern is to say, you know what, we had the capability of going 350, but the district was conservative and the district worked with the community to make sure that we stayed at that 187, so that way there wasn't a tax burden in regards to messaging and in regards to the actual factual information. So
I think that's the best way to put it. And here's the flip side of it, right? There are some school districts that called bond elections for 150 million 2 years ago. They didn't spend it fast enough, right? So the money's been sitting in their accounts, and at the same time, I guess no one could have predicted COVID. But no one could have predicted lumber to go up as dramatically as it did, right? So what used to be a $20 million elementary school is now costing 30 million, right? But they went to the voters and only asked for 20. So I think someone mentioned earlier, like, this is not the end all be all. So this 187 is a very conservative number for the current debt structure that we have. And you want to be able to spend that money down and not have it sitting there, not accumulating any interest. And then your property, your projects going up in construction costs and not having enough money to build.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mejia.
Thank you.
Here's up some, did anybody have any questions, any further questions? Board? All right, guys, we're at that point.
I one for clarification.
Ms. Searles.
Mr. Mejia, when you say finance for 7 years, isn't that, could you explain
Sure
that?
thing, sure thing.
Yeah,
Mr.
because
Mejia,
it's-
still use the
Oh,
microphone.
sure.
Thank you.
Good thing. Sorry, sometimes I speak in bond
Uh-huh, I know.
terminology. What I mean by spreading it out over 7 years is it's a French word, tranching it out. So basically, we're taking the bond election and dividing it by 5 or 4. And each bond issue will have a life of 25 years,
Thank you.
right? And that's what it's
Yes, thank you very much. I
Okay,
appreciate
you got
the
it.
clarification.
a good thing.
I would like to see us sell those as much as possible as early on. It's just, cheaper money, always better. And get, and then for that, guys, we'd have to get really rolling, right? Get the construction projects in. Not like Bruno, you need more work. You'll need some help. All right, we have, the item before us. I will entertain a motion at this time.
I so move.
Do we have to read this into the record, council, exactly?
The resolution.
I'd suggest a motion along the lines, assuming you want to adopt, which was part of the backup to the board materials. If something, I make a motion to approve the bond election order in the form presented at this meeting for two propositions. Proposition A, 177.5 million for school facility. And Proposition B, for $10 million from funding outstanding maintenance tax.
Is that your motion, Mr. Rodriguez?
I so move what legal counsel has described.
All right, we have a motion for the board as approved by Mr. Rodriguez and recited by our bond counsel. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for the board on this agenda item. Do I hear any further discussion? This is a main motion and amendable. Anybody want to amend it? Okay, Sonia.
Yes,
Full
sir.
board, please.
Mr. Coronado,
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez,
Yes.
Mrs. Mendoza,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mrs. Searles.
No,
Motion passes.
All right, that takes us to the next agenda item, Sonia.
Yes, sir. Item number 4, adjournment.
By unanimous consent of the board, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
7:45.
Great meeting. Great, thank you. Yeah.